My name is Ethan, and if you're reading this, consider it both a warning and a plea. I wish I could go back and unsee the horrors that unfolded in the canyons of the Arizona desert, but the memory is etched into my soul like a scar. What you're about to read isn't a story, it's my truth, raw and terrifying. It all began when my best friend Kyle and I decided to take a camping trip deep into the Arizona desert. We were both adrenaline junkies, always looking for the next adventure, the next challenge. Kyle had read about a series of remote canyons that were said to be both breathtakingly beautiful and dangerously isolated. He pitched the idea one night over beers, his enthusiasm infectious. "Come on, Ethan," he said, his eyes gleaming with excitement. "No cell service, no crowds, just us, nature, and the open sky." What could go wrong? In hindsight, everything. We packed light but smart. Tents, climbing gear, enough food and water for a week, and a map Kyle had printed from some obscure hiking forum. The journey to the canyon was uneventful at first. We drove for hours, the cityscape giving way to vast, arid plains dotted with saguaro cacti in jagged rock formations. By the time we reached the dirt road leading to the canyon, the sun was already dipping below the horizon, casting long shadows across the landscape. "This is it," Kyle said, parking the truck at the edge of a narrow trail. The air was cool, the sky a tapestry of stars. We set up camp near the trailhead, laughing and joking as we cooked dinner over a small fire. The desert was eerily quiet, the kind of silence that feels almost oppressive, but we chalked it up to being city boys unaccustomed to such isolation. That first night, I had the strangest dream. I was standing in the canyon, surrounded by towering rock walls. The moon was full, its silver light illuminating the terrain. But there was something else, a shadowy figure watching me from a distance. It was massive, hunched over, with glowing eyes that pierced the darkness. I woke up in a cold sweat, Kyle snoring softly in the tent beside me. The next morning, we began our descent into the canyon. The trail was rugged and steep, but the scenery was worth every step. Red and orange cliffs loomed overhead, their surfaces streaked with centuries of erosion. The air smelled of dry earth and sage, and the only sounds were the crunch of our boots on gravel and the occasional call of a hawk. By the third day, we were deep in the canyon, far from any semblance of civilization. The isolation was exhilarating, but there was also an undercurrent of unease I couldn't shake. "Does it feel off to you?" I asked Kyle as we set up camp that evening. "Off how?" he replied, tying the last knot on our tent. "I don't know, like we're being watched or something." Kyle laughed, brushing it off as paranoia. But that night, the feeling intensified. The howl, it started with a sound, a low, guttural howl that echoed through the canyon. I sat up in my sleeping bag, heart pounding. "Kyle, wake up," I whispered, shaking him. "What is it?" he mumbled, groggy. "Listen." The howl came again, louder this time, followed by the sound of something moving, heavy footsteps crunching on gravel. Kyle grabbed his flashlight and unzipped the tent. "Probably just a coyote," he said, though his voice lacked confidence. We stepped outside, scanning the darkness. The moon was full, casting an eerie glow over the landscape. The howling stopped, replaced by an oppressive silence. "See? Nothing," Kyle said, though he kept the flashlight beam moving. But then we saw it, two glowing eyes reflecting the light, staring at us from the shadows of a nearby rock formation. They were too high off the ground to belong to a coyote or even a wolf. "What the hell is that?" Kyle whispered. Before I could answer, the creature stepped into the moonlight. It was enormous, at least 7 feet tall, with a muscular, humanoid frame covered in coarse, matted fur. Its face was a grotesque blend of man and beast, with a snout full of sharp teeth and ears that twitched at every sound. The werewolf. Kyle and I froze, too terrified to move. The creature let out a blood-curdling roar and charged. We ran, adrenaline propelling us faster than I thought possible. "Split up!" Kyle shouted, veering left while I took the right. I don't know how long I ran, but by the time I stopped, my lungs were burning and my legs felt like jelly. The canyon was a maze of twists and turns, and I realized with growing dread that I was completely lost. The sound of heavy breathing echoed behind me. I ducked behind a boulder, heart hammering in my chest. The creature was close. I could hear its claws scraping against the rocks, its guttural growls sending shivers down my spine. Then I heard a scream, Kyle's scream. Fear gave way to determination. I couldn't leave him. Gripping the hunting knife I'd brought for emergencies, I crept through the shadows, following the sound. I found him in a clearing, pinned to the ground by the creature. His face was pale, his eyes wide with terror. Without thinking, I charged, plunging the knife into the creature's side. It roared in pain, swiping at me with claws that tore through my jacket like paper. I stumbled back, blood dripping from my arm, but the distraction gave Kyle enough time to grab a rock and smash it against the creature's head. We ran again, the creature's roars echoing behind us. By dawn, we found ourselves at the edge of a cliff. The creature was still following us, its glowing eyes visible even in the early light. "We have to make a stand," Kyle said, gripping another rock. I nodded, gripping my knife tighter. The creature lunged and the fight was a blur of claws, teeth, and desperation. In the end, it was the sunlight that saved us. As the first rays of dawn hit the creature, it let out an agonized howl and retreated into the shadows, its form seeming to dissolve like smoke. Kyle and I made it back to the truck, battered and shaken but alive. We never spoke about what happened, not to each other, not to anyone. But the nightmares never stopped, and every full moon, I can still hear the howls.